Welcome to Karma Chronicles. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin. I was halfway through my lemonade when my brother-in-law opened his mouth. "Hey, you still at that little print shop, right?" he said loud enough for the whole table to hear. People laughed like it was some kind of inside joke. It was June, blazing hot, and I was sitting under a striped umbrella in my sister's backyard in Lexington, Kentucky. She does this neighborhood cookout every summer. Same folding tables, same paper plates, same smug smiles. My name's Rachel Jensen. I'm 29. And yeah, I live here, not by choice, just by logistics. My sister, Natalie, is the unofficial queen of the family. She hosts, she delegates, she brags. Her husband, Kyle, is the golden boy. Local firefighter, CrossFit body, perfect teeth, zero self-awareness. My parents talk about them like they're royalty. They've really figured it out. My mom always says, "I was stacking a burger with pickles when Kyle hit me with that simple job comment." "I'm glad you found something that suits you," he added, grinning. "Nothing wrong with keeping things low-key." My mom laughed. "Oh, Kyle," she said, tapping his shoulder like he was doing stand-up. Then she turned to me, patted my arm, and said, "We're just proud you're not chasing those impossible goals anymore. You're stable? That's what matters." Stable. Like I was a formerly rabid dog who finally stopped biting. Quick note, before we go any further, tell us what city or country you're watching from. I took another sip of lemonade, eyes on the sweat sliding down the glass. I smiled, nodded, didn't say a word. Because no one at that table knew I owned a multi-location packaging and logistics company that serviced over 20 regional brands across the Midwest. No one knew I'd cleared 7 figures last year, or that the print shop was my distribution center. They just knew what I let them know, and today wasn't the day to fix that. Natalie passed around paper towels like she was hosting a damn wedding. "Let's not forget who grilled the perfect hot dogs," she said, winking at Kyle. He raised both arms in victory. "Retire my apron." More laughter. My dad clapped him on the back. "Best son-in-law I could have asked for." I smiled again. Thin, sharp. My jaw tightened so hard it hurt. Then I reached for a second lemonade, because if I didn't keep my hands busy, I was going to break that damn plastic fork in half. I was licking mustard off my thumb when Natalie leaned back in her chair and tilted her head toward me. "Remember when you used to tell everyone you were going to be some high-powered business exec?" she said, grinning like she found an old diary entry. "You were obsessed. Like full-on suits and boardrooms, Shark Tank-level ambition." I gave her a tight smile. My lemonade was already warm. Dad chuckled and waved his beer can. "I'm just glad you finally stopped wasting time on things you couldn't hack." He didn't say it like a jab. He said it like a fact, like we were all just agreeing on something logical and obvious. Kyle tossed a corn cob onto his plate and smirked. "Yeah, I mean, come on. Not everyone's cut out to run companies. Some of us gotta keep it real." He looked at me when he said it. Direct eye contact. That lazy, confident look people get when they think they figured you out. I nodded slowly, said nothing. Natalie raised her plastic cup. "To humble jobs and realistic goals." My mom and dad clinked drinks. Kyle followed. I lifted mine half an inch off the table just to keep the peace. I should have walked away right then, but I stayed. Maybe to see what else they'd say. Maybe because I'd already made it clear I wasn't going to start a fight. "Oh my God," Natalie went on. "Remember when she called me freshman year? Screaming about how a professor gave her a B and it ruined her GPA trajectory or something." I blinked. "That never happened," Dad laughed. "Didn't you cry in that finance class and try to drop it mid-semester?" "That didn't happen either." Kyle leaned forward. No. What about the time you had a vision board taped to your dorm wall that said VP of Operations by 30? I exhaled through my nose and forced a little laugh. I was 19. We all taped dumb crap to our walls. Natalie shrugged. "Still, it's good you got over all that. You were kind of intense back then." "I guess," I said. My mom sipped her iced tea and looked proud. "It's maturity, sweetheart. We all change. I'm just happy you're at peace now." At peace, I was grinding out 18-hour weeks, juggling supplier contracts and retail rollouts, flying to Minneapolis and Atlanta in the same week, managing 3 teams across 2 states. But sure, peace. "Must be nice not to have all that stress," Kyle added. "You just show up, print some stuff, go home, right?" I tilted my head like I was thinking. Something like that. He grinned like I'd proved his point. And that's when they really got going. Natalie started retelling some story about how I freaked out sophomore year because I didn't get an internship I never even applied for. My dad chimed in with something about how I went through phases, how he knew I'd settle down eventually. Yeah, Kyle said, still laughing. You were always high strung. Remember that one Christmas you showed up with a notebook full of business goals? Bullet points and everything, Natalie said. It was like a TED talk at the dinner table. Everyone laughed again. They loved this version of me, this tiny, boxed up character they could dust off and mock like a punchline. Not one of them thought for a second that I could have pulled any of it off. And I let them keep thinking that. Let them keep believing I printed labels, packed boxes, clocked out, and went home to microwave dinners. Because the truth wasn't for that table, not yet. I was scraping plates into the trash when Natalie slid up beside me with a rag in her hand, and that look, eyebrows lifted, like she was about to say something from the heart. Hey, she said, lowering her voice. You got a minute? I didn't answer, just handed her a greasy platter and kept moving. She followed me to the sink. I wanted to talk to you about something. And don't roll your eyes, okay? I didn't roll them, but I was close. I just think it's time you started thinking about real life, she said, like we were about to talk finances or medical insurance. You know, marriage, maybe a family. I stared at her. What makes you think I'm not? Natalie gave a little laugh, like I'd proven her point. I mean, come on. You've never brought anyone around. You're always working that little job. It's time to start thinking long term. She reached under the counter and pulled out another stack of solo cups. Actually, I wanted to mention someone. Here we go. His name's Eric, she said, smiling like this was exciting news. He goes to our church. Works over at Dawson's Auto, just off Richmond Road. Great guy, solid job, salt of the earth. I opened the dishwasher and started loading silverware. Okay. He's not flashy, she continued. Wouldn't expect too much. He's real grounded. I think he'd appreciate a girl like you. A girl like me. I didn't say a word, just shoved a few butter knives into the rack. Natalie took that as encouragement. He's a hard worker, no drama. Owns his own trailer and everything. My friend Tina says he's sweet with his mom, and he's been asking if I knew anyone decent. I closed the dishwasher hard enough to make her flinch. You're 29, Rach, she said, like she was reading a countdown clock. You're not getting any younger. You don't want to wake up one day and realize the ship sailed. Thanks for the warning, I said. She reached over and touched my arm. I just don't want you to be alone forever, working some dead-end job with no one to come home to. The urge to say something sharp burned in my throat, but I swallowed it. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and finally looked at her. I'll think about it. That was all it took. Her face lit up like I'd agreed to a proposal. She pulled me into a hug. You'll see. You deserve someone steady, normal, who won't make you feel like you have to be more than you are. I stood there, arms at my sides, while she squeezed me like she'd just saved my future from going down the drain with the potato salad. She let go, smoothed her shirt, and smiled. You'll thank me one day. I nodded, even though my jaw was locked so tight it hurt. Then I grabbed the trash bag and headed out to the bins. I needed air. I came back from the trash cans just in time to hear my mom say, he'd be perfect for Rachel. Really down to earth. Solid values. They were all back on the patio, lawn chairs spread out like some suburban round table. The citronella candle in the middle of the table was barely keeping up with the mosquitoes. Kyle popped open another beer and passed one to my dad. You ever met Eric, sir? Works with Jimmy Dawson's kid over at the shop. Big into bass fishing, too. My dad nodded like that was a resume. I've seen him at church a couple times. Clean cut, polite. Works with his hands. Natalie jumped in. I told her all about him. She said she'll think about it. She did. My mom lit up. That's good. That's real good. I'm glad she's accepted reality and moved on from all that business school stuff. I froze for half a second before walking over to sit at the edge of the table. My dad raised his bottle in my direction. Honest work is more important than ambition anyway. You keep your head down, do your job, live a quiet life. Nothing wrong with that. My sister leaned in. So I was thinking, we could do a double date. You, Eric, me, Kyle. Nothing fancy. Just burgers and bowling or something. Let you two talk. No pressure. Sounds nice, I said, forcing a smile. I stirred the ice in my lemonade like I wasn't picturing the contracts folder sitting on my desk back home. Like I wasn't about to finalize a $1 million logistics deal with one of the biggest regional beverage brands in the country. But sure, bowling and burgers. They kept talking about Eric's dog, his truck, his ability to fix anything with a motor. Kyle tossed in a joke about how mechanics don't ghost you for work trips, and everyone laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd heard all night. My mom reached over and squeezed my hand. We just want you to be happy, sweetheart, not chasing things that don't matter. I nodded again, smiled again, said all the right nothings. By 9:30, the food was cleared and the lights were dimming. I thanked Natalie for dinner, hugged my mom, waved to Kyle like he didn't just strip my identity to a punchline, and slid behind the wheel of my car. The second I shut the door, the smile dropped. I drove home with the windows down, no music, just the buzz of summer air and streetlights blurring past. At home, I didn't even change out of my jeans. I walked straight to my office, flipped on the desk lamp, and opened my laptop. There it was, tomorrow's pitch deck. 48 pages, market growth projections, logistics maps, quarterly revenue forecasts. I skimmed it one more time, then opened the mock-up for the custom eco-packaging we were proposing. My company's name, Jensen Solutions, stamped clean in the footer. I adjusted one bullet point, saved the file, and set an alarm for 5:30. Burgers and bowling, huh? I had a national retailer to win over, and they had no idea who they were talking about. The following weeks blurred into flights, supplier calls, and late nights. And then, 3 months later, I was back at my desk, redlining a proposal draft. The phone on the corner of my desk buzzed once. My assistant, Maddie, knocked on the door frame before stepping in. "You've got a personal call," she said softly. "She sounds upset." I motioned for her to hand me the phone. "Who is it?" "Your sister." I snatched it from her hand. "Natalie." Her voice cracked through the line, jagged and frantic. "Rachel, Kyle collapsed. He just dropped during a fire inspection drill. He couldn't breathe. He's in an ambulance. Oh my God." I felt my chest tighten but kept my voice steady. "Where are they taking him?" She sobbed. "I don't know yet. They said city hospital. Chest pain, trouble breathing. They're rushing." "Tell me which hospital," I said, sharper than I meant to. There was a shuffle on her end, someone yelling in the background. Then she came back, voice shaking. "St. Joseph's, downtown. Please?" I hung up before she finished. Maddie's eyes were wide. "Everything okay?" I stood up, already pulling my blazer off the chair. "Cover the next call. Tell them to hold the retailer deck until I'm back." "You're leaving?" "I'm going across the street," I said, grabbing my badge from the hook. The plant's boardroom windows faced the hospital's ER entrance. I'd seen the ambulances come and go every day for years. Now one of them had my sister's husband inside. I walked fast, heels striking the polished floor of the hallway, pushing through the double glass doors out into the sharp fall air. Sirens echoed faintly from the other block. Crossing the street felt like stepping between two lives, the one they thought I had and the one I actually ran. Trucks rolled past with my company's name painted on the side, heading for outbound docks. Employees in high-vis vests nodded as I passed. I didn't stop. Inside the hospital lobby, the security guard glanced at my badge and immediately opened the staff access gate. "Morning, Ms. Jensen," he said. "Afternoon," I muttered, already heading for the elevators. Third floor, executive wing. My keycard beeped green at the boardroom door, the same room where, twice a month, I sat with the hospital's directors, reviewing budgets and funding for the surgical wing. I shut the door behind me, dropped my bag on the conference table, and opened my laptop. My hands shook for a second before I forced them still. I texted Maddie, "Reschedule all calls, emergency at St. Joseph's. I'll update later." Then I stared at my screen, seeing nothing but my sister's face from the night of the cookout, the smug smile when she pitched me Eric like she was doing me a favor, and now her husband was on a gurney somewhere below my feet. I straightened my blazer, took a breath, and hit the intercom to call the attending desk. "This is Rachel Jensen, Board of Directors. I need an immediate update on an incoming firefighter from a drill collapse." My voice was calm, my hands were ice. Downstairs, the elevators dinged open, spilling out a rush of ER staff. Somewhere in that chaos, Natalie was about to walk in, and she still had no idea who she was calling for help. I stepped away from the table, already moving toward the door. It was time to go downstairs. I left the boardroom and took the back elevator down to the ER. As soon as the doors opened, two nurses at the main desk looked up. Recognition hit their faces. "Ms. Jensen," one of them said, already reaching for the tablet. "Give me attending details," I said, walking straight to the counter. Mid-30s male, firefighter, collapsed during drill, chest pain and respiratory distress. Should have arrived less than 10 minutes ago. The nurse nodded quickly. "Name's Kyle Branson. He's in Trauma Bay 3. Dr. Miller's the lead. Page her." She didn't hesitate. This wasn't new for me. Every time we approved new grants or hired for surgical leads, I was here. Not as family, not as a visitor, as chair. And that meant when I asked for a briefing, people moved. 30 seconds later, Dr. Miller jogged out of the trauma bay, gloves still on, hair pulled back. She looked relieved when she saw me. "Rachel," she said, breath sharp. "I was just about to request an ICU consult. He's crashing fast. BP's dropping, O2 saturations all over the place. We're looking at a pulmonary embolism, possibly massive." "Confirmed?" I asked. "CT's still running, but clinically, it fits. We've got him on heparin now, but I want to move to catheter-directed thrombolysis. You think we'll need IR or surgical backup?" "If this doesn't buy us time, yes, possibly tonight." I nodded once. "Do what you need to do. Prioritize oxygenation and get IR prepped now. I'll clear the call." She turned and rushed back toward the bay. That's when I heard Natalie. Her voice cut through the hallway like a blade. Sharp, panicked, loud. "I need to speak to someone in charge. My husband is back there, and no one's telling me anything." She was standing at the entrance with her purse falling off her shoulder, hair half-tied, eyes red and wide. The clerk behind the glass looked flustered. "Ma'am, please, if you could just wait." I walked over, calm, steady. The nurse behind me called out, "She's with us," and buzzed open the side door. Natalie's head whipped toward me. "Rachel." "I'm here," I said. She blinked. How did you—" Before she could finish, Dr. Miller reappeared. "Ms. Jensen," she said clearly, "do you want to take over the case? I can brief your team if you prefer." Natalie froze. "Take over," she repeated, confused. Her voice cracked. What does she mean, take over? I glanced at the nurse. "Get us into the consult room." They opened the door. I motioned for Natalie to follow. She hesitated, completely lost, then stumbled in after me. I could feel her staring as we sat down. Her breathing was all over the place. "She said take over," she said again, barely above a whisper. "Rachel, what's going on?" I leaned forward, folding my hands. "I sit on the board here. Chair, actually. Chair. This hospital's surgical and ER budget goes across my desk every quarter. I've worked closely with Dr. Miller and her department for 3 years." She didn't move, didn't speak, just kept blinking like the words didn't make sense in her head. The nurse stepped in quietly and handed me an update sheet. I glanced over the numbers. BP stabilizing, oxygen climbing. Temporary good signs. "They're going to do everything they can," I said, eyes still on the paper. "But it's serious. The clot's big. He needs intervention now." Natalie looked at me like she'd never seen me before, like I'd walked in wearing someone else's face. "But you run a print shop." I looked up. "No," I said. "Not for a long time." She didn't ask anything else, just sat there in silence, her mouth slightly open, like the whole room was tilting sideways. Behind the glass wall, I saw Dr. Miller moving fast, barking orders. I stood. "We'll get through this," I told her, and then I walked out to authorize the surgical prep. Natalie sat frozen in the consult chair, like if she held still long enough, this might all just reverse itself. I stood by the door, one hand still on the file folder the nurse handed me, the other wrapped tight around my phone. She finally blinked. "Wait, you're the chair of this hospital." I nodded. "Board of directors. I chair the nonprofit foundation too. We fund surgical grants, emergency expansions, most of the ER tech that's saving Kyle right now." Her mouth parted, but no sound came out. I didn't wait. "I also own the packaging company you all joke about. It's not a side gig. It's a regional supplier. We move freight, custom print packaging, and manage logistics for over 20 brands between here and Chicago. That little print shop, it's got 4 distribution centers. I have teams in 3 states." She stared at me like I'd just told her I was secretly in the CIA. "I thought you left business school," she said, voice low, like she was speaking through static. I did. I left their version of it, I said. Didn't mean I stopped building. But we thought, she shook her head, eyes darting. You told us it was just a print job. No, I said. I told you what you wanted to hear. None of you ever asked for more. That hit her. I saw it land. A knock tapped at the door before she could answer. Dr. Chen stepped in, attending vascular surgeon, tall, calm, focused like always. Mrs. Branson, he asked. Natalie stood like her knees weren't fully locked. Yes. Your husband has a large pulmonary embolism in his right lung. We're prepping for catheter-directed thrombolysis now, but if his pressure drops again, we may need to go to open surgery. You'll be updated throughout. Would you like to see him before we move? She looked back at me like she needed permission. I nodded once. Go ahead. Dr. Chen held the door open. Natalie took a shaky step, then paused. But you run a print shop, she said, more to herself than me. I set the folder down gently on the table. I own a logistics and packaging firm, I said. It's not exactly mom and pop. She looked me in the eye then, really looked, like everything she thought she knew had just slid off a cliff. She didn't say another word, just gave a small nod, turned, and followed the nurse out. I stood there a second longer, alone in that consult room, the hum of the fluorescent lights buzzing over my head like static. The same sister who'd once laughed at my dorm room vision board had just walked out the door, speechless because I'd actually built it. And now her perfect husband's life depended on the hospital I'd helped shape from behind the scenes. I wasn't angry, I wasn't smug. I just felt still, like the truth had landed, heavy and solid, and finally stayed put. I stepped out and headed toward the ICU wing. There were more decisions to make, and this time, everyone knew who I was. I was back in the consultation room 10 minutes later, sitting across from two staffers I'd worked with for years, Linda from finance and Dr. Patel, the ER's clinical coordinator. None of them asked why I was there. They already knew. Dr. Chen walked in still wearing his gown, mask pulled down, gloves off. He looked tired but focused. Procedure's going well, he said, looking at me first. It was close. He had a massive clot load in the right pulmonary artery. We were seconds from coding him when we got the catheter in. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. We stabilized him and cleared the blockage, Chen continued. Vitals are holding steady now, but he's going to ICU for monitoring. The next 24 hours are key. Hey, thank you, I said. Appreciate the update. He nodded, then turned toward the door, right as it opened. My parents walked in looking like they'd run through traffic. My mom's makeup was smudged, and Dad's shirt was half untucked. Rachel, my mom said, eyes flicking around the room. What's going on? Natalie said you were... She paused. Dr. Chen offered his hand. You must be Mr. and Mrs. Jensen. I'm Dr. Chen, attending surgeon. Your son-in-law's procedure just wrapped. My dad blinked. You're the surgeon. And Rachel works with us? Chen said casually. She's the one who helped us approve the new catheter suite. Saved us hours today. My mom turned to me, slow. You know him. I nodded. We've worked together for years. Dad squinted. Wait, since when are you involved in hospitals? I chair the nonprofit foundation here, I said, and I'm on the board. I helped allocate the funding that paid for most of what saved Kyle's life tonight. My mom sat down like her knees buckled. But you work at a print shop, she said, voice cracking. I didn't blink. No, I own a logistics and packaging company. Multi-state operation. We supply major retail brands. The print facility is just one part of it. They both just stared. My dad's mouth opened, then shut again. Linda stood up quietly, gave me a respectful nod, and left the room. Dr. Patel followed. Now it was just the three of us. My mom's eyes welled. Why didn't you tell us? I looked straight at her. Because it didn't change anything about how you treated me. She covered her mouth and for the first time in years didn't have anything to say. My dad rubbed his hands together and stared down at the floor. You really built all that. I did, I said, without your help, without anyone's. They sat there in stunned silence, not angry, not defensive, just finally seeing what had been right in front of them all along. No one moved, no one filled the space. For once, it was quiet enough for the truth to breathe. I stood up and walked to the window, watching the ICU staff roll Kyle through the hallway. They'd all remember today for the emergency, but I'd remember it for this moment, when the curtain finally dropped. The next morning, I sat by the ICU window, coffee in hand, legs crossed, blazer draped over the chair beside me. I hadn't gone home. Didn't feel right to. Kyle's monitors beeped steady now. His oxygen had been lowered overnight, and he was holding. Dr. Chen came by at sunrise and said the clot was cleared. No surgery needed. Natalie was asleep in a stiff chair across the room, curled up with a thin blanket and her coat over her legs. Around 9, Kyle stirred. I stood. He blinked hard, eyes heavy and confused. The machine clicked as it readjusted his IV rate. "Natalie," he rasped. She jerked awake, stood fast, and was at his side in 2 seconds. "I'm here," she whispered, gripping his hand. "You're okay." His eyes wandered to the machines, the IV, the band around his chest. "What happened?" "You collapsed at work," she said gently. "It was bad. A blood clot in your lung." His face tightened. "I remember going down. Couldn't breathe." "Dr. Chen saved you," she said, brushing his hair back. "But..." She looked over at me, paused, then back to him. "Rachel got you here. She made it all happen. She's the reason you're alive." He turned his head toward me, slow and confused. "You?" I nodded once. He squinted, voice scratchy. "Wait, you're not just the print girl." I looked him straight in the eye. "No," I said, "not for a long time." Silence. He stared at me like something in his head couldn't sink. Then his bottom lip started to tremble. Tears ran down the sides of his face and soaked into the pillow. "I didn't know," he whispered. "Rachel, I'm so sorry." He turned to Natalie. "I was such a jerk to her." She didn't respond, just gripped his hand harder. He looked back at me again. "You saved me. God, I made fun of you." I didn't say anything, just sat back down in the chair and placed my coffee on the little tray table beside me. "You were always more than me," he said through his teeth. "I just never saw it." The machines kept their rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. Natalie wiped her eyes but didn't speak. Kyle reached toward me a little, IV tubes following. "Can you forgive me?" I didn't move right away. Then I nodded. Once. "That's not what matters right now," I said. He cried quietly, shoulders shaking just a little. I let him. I didn't want a big speech. Didn't need one. The apology didn't erase anything, but it landed. And for the first time, it wasn't laced with sarcasm. I sat there with them, not as a sister-in-law or the family disappointment, but as the woman who made the call, moved the pieces, got the right surgeon in the room. I wasn't invisible anymore. And damn, it felt good to say nothing at all. Just let the weight of it lift. Quiet, solid, done. A few weeks later, we met for dinner at a steakhouse just outside town. Real tablecloths, cloth napkins, dim lighting. My dad even wore a blazer. I showed up in a dark blouse, jeans, and low heels. Nothing flashy. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. This time, nobody asked me how the print shop was going. Instead, my mom leaned across the table before the drinks even came and said to the waitress, "This is my daughter. She's a CEO." The girl smiled politely and asked if I wanted lemon in my water. My mom looked more proud of that sentence than anything I'd seen since Natalie's wedding. My dad cleared his throat after ordering. "So, what's your process with all the packaging stuff? Like, how do you even start with a company?" I answered in plain terms: regional fulfillment plans, branded materials, vendor sourcing. He actually listened. Then he asked, "If a guy wanted to invest in your company, how would that work?" "Asking for a friend." I almost laughed. Natalie sat across from me, picking at her salad. She was quiet, not cold, just careful, like someone learning how to walk again. Kyle stayed home, still on light duty, but she told me he asked about me a lot, said he hoped we could reset. I told her maybe. Eric didn't come up, not once. Instead, my mom asked how the hospital board operated, if I liked being involved in that level of decision-making. "It's not about liking it," I said. "It's just part of the job." She nodded like that finally made sense. We ate, talked. Nobody tried to shrink me down. As dessert came, chocolate torte with 2 spoons, my dad raised his glass. "To our girl," he said, looking right at me, who was never ordinary. Everyone followed, even Natalie. I didn't give a speech, Didn't tear up, just smiled and took a sip. That was all I ever wanted. Not revenge, not recognition on a stage, just the truth, out in the open. And a family that finally saw me without trying to rewrite the story. I paid the check on my phone before the waiter even dropped it off. No one argued. No one needed to.